The generator roared to life at exactly 10:01 p.m., and I could already picture Deborah's face turning the same shade as her overpriced Christmas wreath. After 3 years of dealing with the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association and their endless stream of petty rules, I had finally reached my breaking point. But let me back up, because this story starts 2 weeks earlier when the power grid in Northern Virginia decided to give everyone a preview of what winter would look like without electricity. My name is Thomas Shepard, and I moved to Meadowbrook Estates in Fairfax County 3 years ago with my wife Sarah and our 2 kids. The neighborhood looked perfect on paper. Good schools, well-maintained streets, friendly neighbors. What the realtor conveniently forgot to mention was that Deborah Morrison ran the HOA like her own personal fiefdom, and she had made it her life's mission to make everyone as miserable as she was. The woman was 52 years old, drove a white Lexus SUV with a bumper sticker that said, "I speak to managers," and had that particular haircut that should come with a warning label. The first power outage hit on December 20th, right when the temperature dropped to 15 degrees. A transformer exploded somewhere on Route 50, and suddenly 1,200 homes in our area went dark. No big deal, I thought. I had prepared for this. 6 months earlier, I had purchased a Honda EU 7000 IS generator, top of the line, quiet operation, enough to power my essentials and keep my family warm. I had even gone through the proper channels, submitted the paperwork to the HOA, got it approved, and installed it according to code with a licensed electrician. Everything was legal, documented, and above board. That first night, my generator hummed quietly in the backyard, keeping our heat running, our fridge cold, and our phones charged. By morning, the power came back on, and I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. So incredibly wrong. 3 days later, I found a letter in my mailbox. Not an email, not a phone call, but an actual printed letter on HOA letterhead. The thing probably cost them $5 to produce and mail. It informed me that the HOA board had held an emergency meeting and passed a new rule. Generators could only be operated between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. Any violation would result in a $500 fine per occurrence. I read that letter 3 times, standing in my driveway in the cold, trying to process the stupidity. Generators existed for emergencies. Power outages did not care about what time it was. People needed heat at night, especially in December in Virginia. But none of that mattered to Deborah and her little committee of bored suburbanites who had nothing better to do than create problems where none existed. I called the HOA office that afternoon. A bored-sounding woman named Patricia answered and transferred me to Deborah's voicemail. I left a polite message explaining that the generator rule made no sense for emergency situations and requested clarification. No response. I called again the next day. Voicemail. I sent an email. Auto reply saying she would get back to me within 3 to 5 business days. Christmas came and went. The power stayed on. I almost forgot about the whole generator situation until New Year's Day, when another cold front swept through and the grid went down again. This time it was worse. The temperature dropped to 8 degrees, with wind chill making it feel like -5. Weather reports said the outage could last 2 to 3 days while repair crews worked on down lines. I waited until 8 p.m., hoping the power would come back. It did not. My house was getting cold. I could see my breath inside. Sarah bundled the kids in extra blankets, but our 6-year-old daughter Emma was already complaining about being cold, and our 9-year-old son Tyler was shivering despite wearing 2 sweaters. At 8:30, I went outside and started the generator. Warm air began flowing through the vents within 15 minutes. The fridge kicked back on. The lights worked. We were going to be okay. I planned to run it until the power came back or until morning, whichever came first. At 10:15 p.m., someone pounded on my front door. Not knocked, pounded. I looked through the peephole and saw Deborah standing there in a puffy white coat, her face contorted in fury. Behind her stood Gary Peterson, the HOA vice president, looking uncomfortable. I opened the door. "Evening, Deborah." "Turn off that generator immediately," she snapped. "No greeting, no pleasantries. You are in violation of HOA regulations. It is after 10 p.m. It is 8 degrees outside and my children are inside," I said calmly. "The power is out. The generator stays on." "The rule clearly states no generators after 10 p.m., Gary said, reading from his phone. "The board voted on this unanimously." "The rule is insane," I replied. "People need power during outages regardless of time." "Rules are rules," Deborah said. "If we make exceptions for you, we have to make exceptions for everyone. Turn it off now or you will be fined." "Fine me then," I said. "My family's safety is worth more than your arbitrary rule." Her eyes narrowed. "You are looking at $500 per occurrence. That adds up quickly, Mr. Shepherd." "Send me the bill," I said and closed the door. I heard her shouting something else, but I did not care. I went back inside where it was warm and checked on the kids. They were already looking better, playing a board game by the light of the kitchen lamp. Sarah gave me a questioning look and I just shook my head. We would deal with whatever came next. The fine arrived 4 days later. $500 for operating a generator after 10 p.m. on January 1st. The letter included a stern warning that continued violations would result in additional fines and possible legal action. I filed it in my folder with all the other HOA nonsense and waited for the next board meeting. Meadowbrook Estates HOA held monthly meetings on the third Tuesday of each month. Any homeowner could attend, though usually only 10 or 15 people showed up out of the 300 homes in the neighborhood. January 15th, I made sure to be there early. The meeting took place in the community center, a bland rectangular building that also served as the pool house in summer. I arrived at 6:45 for the 7 p.m. meeting. Deborah was already there, setting up folders at a table in front. Gary and the other board members filtered in. Linda Chen, the secretary, Mark Williams, the treasurer, and Stephanie Barker, the member-at-large. All of them were in their late 40s or early 50s. All of them looked like they had never faced a real problem in their lives. Other homeowners trickled in. I recognized a few faces but did not know most of them by name. By 7, about 20 people filled the metal folding chairs. Deborah called the meeting to order and started with the usual routine: approval of last meeting's minutes, financial report, landscaping updates. I waited through 30 minutes of mind-numbing minutiae before she finally opened the floor for homeowner comments. I raised my hand. She looked directly at me, and I saw the flicker of annoyance cross her face. "Yes, Mr. Shepherd," she said, her voice dripping with false politeness. I stood up. "I want to discuss the generator rule that was passed last month, the one restricting operation to daytime hours only." "That matter has already been decided by the board," Deborah said quickly. "We are not reopening discussion." "I am not asking you to reopen discussion," I replied. "I am asking you to explain the reasoning behind a rule that prevents homeowners from using backup power during nighttime emergencies." Several other homeowners murmured in agreement. I was not the only one with a generator, I realized. Mark Williams cleared his throat. "The rule was implemented due to noise complaints. Generators can be quite loud, and many residents were disturbed by the noise during evening hours." "My generator operates at 58 decibels at 23 feet, I said. "That is quieter than a normal conversation. It is also in my backyard, a minimum of 40 feet from any neighbor's house. Who exactly complained? Deborah shuffled her papers. We received several complaints. The names are confidential. So you pass a neighborhood-wide rule affecting everyone's safety based on anonymous complaints, I pressed. That does not seem like proper procedure. The board has the authority to implement rules for the good of the community, Linda Chen said. This is outlined in the CC and Articles that you signed when you purchased your home. The CC and Articles also say that rules must be reasonable and not endanger residents, I countered. Preventing people from having heat and power during winter emergencies is dangerous. You can always go to a hotel if the power goes out, Deborah said dismissively. So your solution is that families should leave their homes and pay for hotels rather than use emergency equipment that they legally own and properly installed. I could feel my anger rising but kept my voice level. Do you realize how ridiculous that sounds? Watch your tone, Deborah snapped. This meeting will remain civil. I am being civil, I said. I am asking legitimate questions about a rule that makes no sense. Gary leaned forward. Mr. Shepherd, the board has made its decision. If you have a formal complaint, you can submit it in writing and we will review it at next month's meeting. I want to call for a vote, I said. The CC and Articles state that any homeowner can petition for a community-wide vote on any rule. I am formally requesting that this generator rule be put to a vote of all residents. Deborah's face flushed red. That requires signatures from 20% of homeowners. Do you have those signatures? I will get them, I said and sat down. The meeting continued, but I barely heard any of it. I was already planning my next move. After the meeting ended, 3 other homeowners approached me. Bob Martinez from Oak Street had a generator and thought the rule was stupid. Kelly Foster from Elm Drive was worried about keeping her elderly mother warm during outages. James Richardson from Maple Court was just generally fed up with the HOA's overreach. I will help you get signatures, Bob said. This rule is insane. We exchanged phone numbers and made plans to canvass the neighborhood that weekend. I went home feeling slightly better. At least I was not alone in this fight. The next day, I received another letter. This one informed me that my generator violated the architectural guidelines because it was visible from the street. I walked around to the front of my house and looked. If you stood at the very edge of my property line and craned your neck at just the right angle, you could see maybe 6 inches of the generator's corner past the fence. That was apparently enough. The letter demanded that I either move the generator or install additional screening within 30 days or face a fine of $200, plus $50 per day, until the violation was corrected. I crumpled the letter and threw it in the trash. Then I retrieved it, smoothed it out, and added it to my growing file. That weekend, Bob, Kelly, James, and I spent Saturday and Sunday going door to door collecting signatures. We needed signatures from 60 households to reach the 20% threshold. By Sunday evening, we had 93. Homeowners were angry. Many had not attended the meeting and had not known about the rule until we told them. Several had generators of their own. Others thought the rule was an overreach even if they did not personally own generators. Monday morning, I compiled all the signatures into a formal petition, made copies, and hand-delivered them to the HOA office. Patricia took them without comment and said the board would review them. 2 weeks passed with no response. I called multiple times, voicemail. I sent emails, auto replies. Finally, I showed up at the HOA office during their posted hours. Patricia looked uncomfortable when I walked in. I need to speak with Deborah, I said. She is not available right now, Patricia replied. Then I will wait. I sat down in one of the cheap plastic chairs in the waiting area. Patricia made a phone call, speaking quietly. 5 minutes later, Deborah emerged from the back office looking furious. "Mr. Shepherd, you cannot simply show up here demanding meetings," she said. "I submitted a formal petition with 93 signatures 3 weeks ago," I replied. "I have not received any response. When will the vote be scheduled?" "The board is still reviewing the petition to verify the signatures," she said. "How long does it take to verify 93 signatures?" I asked. "As long as necessary to ensure compliance with procedures," she said curtly. "We will notify you when we have completed our review. The CC and Artiques state you have 30 days to respond to a valid petition," I said. "That deadline is in 1 week." Her jaw clenched. "We are aware of the timeline, Mr. Shepherd." I left, but something felt wrong. She was stalling, I was sure of it. I went home and reread the entire CC&R document, all 47 pages of dense legal text. Buried in Section 12, Subsection 4, I found the clause I was looking for. If the board failed to respond to a valid petition within 30 days, the petition matter automatically went to a community vote within 60 days. I documented everything. Dates I submitted the petition, dates of my follow-up attempts, copies of emails and phone records. If Deborah wanted to play games, I would make sure I had every scrap of evidence ready. 3 days before the 30-day deadline, I received a letter. The board had completed their review and found that 17 of the signatures were invalid for various technical reasons. Wrong address listed, illegible handwriting, missing dates. That brought the total to 76 signatures, which was still well above the 60 needed. The letter grudgingly acknowledged that the petition met the requirements and stated that a community vote would be scheduled for March 10th, approximately 6 weeks away. I should have felt victorious, but something gnawed at me. 6 weeks was a long time. What was Deborah planning? I found out 3 days later when every household in Meadowbrook Estates received a glossy 4-page mailer. The front showed a happy family sleeping peacefully with the headline, "Sleep peacefully in your home." Inside was a fear-mongering propaganda piece about how generators were dangerous, caused carbon monoxide deaths, created noise pollution, and decreased property values. It cited statistics that were technically true but wildly misleading, like mentioning that portable generators caused hundreds of deaths per year, while failing to note that those deaths were from indoor use or improper ventilation, not from properly installed outdoor units. The mailer urged residents to vote no on the generator petition to maintain our peaceful community standards and protect our children's sleep. At the bottom, in tiny print, it noted that the mailer was paid for by the HOA using community funds. I was livid. The HOA was using our own dues money to campaign against a petition that 93 residents had signed. Bob called me within an hour of the mailer arriving. "Did you see this garbage?" he said. "This has to be illegal." "I do not know if it is illegal, but it is definitely unethical," I replied. "We need to respond." We organized quickly. Bob was a graphic designer and put together a simple 1-page flyer with facts about generator safety, the reality of power outages, and the importance of emergency preparedness. Kelly had a blog about emergency preparedness and wrote a detailed post explaining why the HOA rule was dangerous. James knew someone at the local news station and reached out to see if they were interested in covering the story. We printed 500 flyers using our own money and distributed them throughout the neighborhood. Kelly's blog post got picked up by a local emergency management Facebook group and was shared hundreds of times. James's contact at the news station was interested but wanted to wait until closer to the vote. January rolled into February. The power stayed on, but the weather remained bitterly cold. I kept my generator maintained and ready, but I did not need to use it. The HOA sent me another fine for the architectural violation of the generator being partially visible. I ignored it. On February 3rd, another letter arrived. This one was from a law firm. The HOA had hired attorneys and was threatening legal action for my continued violations of community standards. The letter listed 3 violations: operating a generator after 10 p.m. on January 1st, failure to screen equipment from street view, and creating a pattern of disruption within the community. They demanded I pay the accumulated fines totaling $1,200 within 15 days or face a lawsuit. Sarah found me reading the letter in the kitchen. "How bad is it?" she asked. "They hired lawyers," I said. "They want $1,200. "Maybe we should just pay it," she said quietly. "I do not want this to turn into a huge legal battle." "If I pay, they win," I said. "This is not about the money. This is about them pushing us around with stupid rules." "I know, but Thomas, we have the kids to think about." Legal battles are expensive and stressful. She was not wrong, but the principle of it burned in my chest. I had followed every rule, done everything properly, and they were still coming after me because I dared to question Deborah's authority. "Let me talk to a lawyer first," I said. "Just to see where we stand. Then we will decide." I called 3 attorneys the next day. The first 2 did not handle HOA disputes. The third, a woman named Jennifer Martinez, specialized in HOA law. I made an appointment for that Friday. Jennifer's office was in a renovated house in downtown Fairfax. She was in her mid-30s, sharply dressed, and had a wall full of law books and framed case victories. I laid out everything: the original generator approval, the new rule, the petition, the fines, the threatening letter. She listened carefully, taking notes. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "You have a strong case," she said. "Several things work in your favor. First, the generator was approved before the new rule was implemented. Second, the rule arguably violates the CC and Articus requirement that rules must be reasonable and not endanger residents. Third, the board appears to be selectively enforcing rules and possibly misusing community funds." "So, what are my options?" I asked. "You can pay the fines and continue fighting through the petition process. You can refuse to pay and let them sue you, which gives you grounds for a counterclaim. Or you can file a lawsuit first, challenging the rule's validity." She paused. "The third option is the most aggressive and expensive, but it might be the most effective." "How expensive are we talking?" "My retainer for an HOA dispute is $5,000. Depending on how long it takes, total costs could range from $8,000 to $20,000. I felt my stomach drop. That was a lot of money we had earmarked for Emma's orthodontist and a family vacation. "Let me think about it," I said. "Take your time," Jennifer said. "But do not wait too long. If they file first, you are on the defensive from the start." I drove home in a daze. $20,000 to fight over the right to keep my family warm during power outages. It was insane. But backing down meant Deborah would keep pushing, keep creating arbitrary rules, keep making everyone's lives miserable. That night, Sarah and I talked for hours. She was worried about the money and the stress. I was worried about setting a precedent. Eventually, we reached a compromise. We would wait until after the March vote. If the community voted to overturn the generator rule, problem solved. If the vote failed or the HOA interfered, then we would consider legal action. February continued cold and gray. I focused on building support for the vote. Bob, Kelly, James, and I organized a community meeting at the public library, completely separate from the HOA. About 40 people showed up. We discussed emergency preparedness, showed examples of properly installed generators, and talked about the dangers of the HOA's overreach. 2 local news stations sent reporters. They interviewed several homeowners and got footage of my generator setup. The pieces aired on the evening news that week, painting the HOA in a pretty negative light. Deborah declined to comment on camera, but they showed her hurrying away from a reporter with a no comment. The coverage helped. I could feel momentum building. People stopped me in the grocery store to say they would vote to overturn the rule. Neighbors I barely knew came up during walks to express support. But Deborah was not done. A week before the vote, every household received another mailer, this one even more inflammatory. It featured a photo of a house fire with the caption, "Generator fires kill families," and implied that allowing generators to run at night would lead to deaths and destruction. The cherry on top was a quote attributed to a local fire marshal, saying that residential generators were a significant hazard. I called the Fairfax County Fire Department the next day. I spoke with the actual fire marshal, Deputy Chief Richard Hayes, and asked about the quote. He had never spoken to anyone from the HOA and was annoyed that his office was being misrepresented. "Properly installed and maintained generators are perfectly safe," he said. "We recommend them for emergency preparedness." "Would you be willing to put that in writing?" I asked. "Absolutely," he said. The next day, I had an official letter from the fire marshal's office stating that properly installed generators posed no significant fire risk and were recommended for emergency use. I made copies and distributed them to every house in the neighborhood, along with a note explaining that the HOA had misrepresented the fire marshal's position. March 10th arrived cold and clear. The vote was conducted by mail-in ballot, with ballots due by 7 p.m. at the community center. All day, I watched people dropping off envelopes at the ballot box the HOA had set up. Bob, Kelly, James, and I took turns monitoring to make sure everything was legitimate. At 7 p.m., Deborah locked the ballot box and took it inside. The count was supposed to be public, so about 30 of us crowded into the community center to watch. The board members sat at a table and began opening envelopes and sorting ballots into piles. The process took 90 minutes. The whole time, Deborah's face grew progressively more pinched. When they finally finished counting, Linda Chen tallied the results 3 times to verify. Gary stood up to announce. The results of the generator rule vote are as follows: 187 votes in favor of repealing the rule, 94 votes against, and 19 abstentions. The rule is officially repealed. The room erupted in applause. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. We had won. The generator rule was gone. Deborah looked like she had swallowed a lemon, but there was nothing she could do. The community had spoken, except that is not where the story ends. Not even close. The very next day, I received a new letter. Despite the rule being repealed, the HOA was still demanding payment of all previous fines totaling $1,200 for violations that occurred while the rule was in effect. They gave me 10 days to pay. I immediately called Jennifer Martinez. "Can they do this?" I asked. "Technically, yes," she said. "The violations occurred when the rule was active, so they can argue the fines are valid. However, you can challenge them on the grounds that the rule was unreasonable and should never have been implemented. It would require litigation." "So we are back to square one," I said, frustrated. "Not quite. You have more ammunition now. You proved the community disagreed with the rule by a 2-to-1 margin. That strengthens your argument that the rule was unreasonable." I thought about it for exactly 2 seconds. File the lawsuit. I am done playing games with these people. Sarah was not happy when I told her, but she understood. Sometimes you have to stand your ground. Jennifer filed a complaint in Fairfax County Circuit Court on March 15th, challenging the validity of the fines and seeking damages for the HOA's harassment and misuse of community funds. The HOA was officially served on March 20th. Their response was predictable. They lawyered up hard. Within a week, they filed a counterclaim demanding not only the $1,200 in fines, but also reimbursement for their legal fees and additional damages for my malicious interference with HOA operations. The legal process ground forward slowly. Discovery, depositions, document requests. My life became a parade of paperwork and attorney meetings. Jennifer was good, though. She systematically dismantled every one of the HOA's arguments. She deposed Deborah, who came across as petty and vindictive on the record. She got documentation showing that the HOA had spent over $4,000 in community funds fighting the generator petition, which was arguably a misuse of funds. The case was set for trial in September. But in late August, something unexpected happened. Another power outage. Hurricane Claudia, a late-season storm, tracked up the East Coast and slammed into Virginia on August 28th. The storm knocked out power to over 500,000 customers, including all of Meadowbrook Estates. Weather reports said power could be out for a week or more. I started my generator at 6 p.m. on the 28th, right as the sun was setting. The generator rule had been repealed, so I was completely within my rights. My house lit up while the rest of the neighborhood sat in darkness. Within an hour, 3 neighbors asked if they could run extension cords to my generator. Bob Martinez had his own generator running. Kelly Foster's mom needed power for her oxygen concentrator, so I helped them run heavy-duty cords to keep it operating. By the end of the night, I was helping 5 different families keep their essentials running over the next 3 days. The neighborhood transformed. Those of us with generators became community hubs. We charged phones, kept medications cold, provided warm spaces for people to gather. Bob and I coordinated schedules so at least one generator was always running in case someone needed help. Deborah's house stayed dark and cold. I knew this because I could see it from my backyard. Her white Lexus sat in the driveway, and a few times I saw her leaving, probably to stay in a hotel. On day 4, the temperature dropped into the 50s at night, cold enough to be uncomfortable but not dangerous. On the morning of September 1st, I was outside refueling my generator when Deborah appeared at my back fence. She looked terrible, hair disheveled, no makeup, wearing a wrinkled tracksuit. "I need to use your generator," she said. No greeting, no apology. I stared at her. "Excuse me, my power is out. I need to plug into your generator." "Then you should have bought your own generator," I said. "Or maybe you should not have tried to ban everyone else from using theirs." "This is an emergency," she snapped. "You cannot refuse to help during an emergency." "Actually, I can," I said. "My generator is running at capacity, helping 5 other families." Families who did not try to fine me for keeping my children warm. Her face flushed red. "You are being vindictive." "I am being practical," I replied. "My generator has limits. I am already helping as many people as I can." "I will report this to the board," she threatened. "You are the board, Deborah, and you are welcome to file another complaint. I am sure my lawyer would love to add it to the lawsuit." She turned and stormed away. I felt a petty satisfaction, but also something else. Pity, maybe. She had created her own misery by pushing pointless rules instead of fostering community. The power came back on September 3rd. The neighborhood slowly returned to normal, But the lawsuit continued. In mid-September, Jennifer called with news. The HOA's attorney reached out. They want to settle. What are the terms? I asked. They drop all fines against you, reimburse your legal fees up to this point, and issue a formal apology. In exchange, you drop your counterclaims and the lawsuit ends. What about the money they misused from community funds? That is the sticking point. They do not want to admit wrongdoing on that front. Then no deal, I said. They do not get to misuse everyone's money and walk away clean. Jennifer went back to negotiate. A week later, she called again. New offer. They drop the fines, reimburse your legal fees, issue an apology, and agree to a third-party audit of HOA finances for the past 2 years. Any misused funds will be returned to the community. That was better. I talked it over with Sarah. What do you think? I asked. I think you have made your point, she said. Take the settlement. Let us get back to normal life. On October 5th, I signed the settlement agreement. The HOA sent a formal letter of apology, acknowledged that the generator rule had been unreasonable, and reimbursed me $8,300 in legal fees. The financial audit happened in November and found that approximately $6,000 had been spent inappropriately on the campaign against the generator petition. That money was refunded to the community fund, but the biggest change happened at the December HOA board elections. Deborah, Gary, and Linda all ran for re-election. All 3 lost by landslides. Bob Martinez was elected president. Kelly Foster became vice president. The new board immediately passed a resolution ensuring that all future rule changes required community input before implementation, and that HOA funds could not be used for political campaigns on internal matters. Winter came around again. On December 20th, exactly 1 year after the first power outage, the grid went down again. Another transformer failure. I went outside, started my generator, and listened to it hum reliably in the cold night air. My house was warm. My family was safe, and nobody was going to find me for it. 2 days later, the power was still out. It was 11 p.m., and I was checking the fuel level on the generator when I saw Gary Peterson walking up my driveway. Not former board member Gary, just neighbor Gary now. "Hey, Thomas," he said, looking sheepish. I wanted to apologize for everything last year. I went along with Deborah because I thought that was what I was supposed to do as vice president. I did not think about how the rule would actually affect people. "I appreciate that," I said. "Also, I was wondering if you had any advice on buying a generator. I want to be prepared for the next outage." I smiled. "Come on, let me show you what I have got." We spent the next 20 minutes talking about generators, fuel efficiency, installation requirements, and safety. Before he left, Gary shook my hand. "You were right to fight this," he said. "We needed someone to stand up to Deborah." After he left, I stood in my backyard for a while, listening to the steady rhythm of the generator and watching lights glow in the windows of my neighbors' houses. Some were lit by generators, some by flashlights and candles, but everyone was managing. The community was figuring it out together, the way it should have been from the start. The power came back on the following afternoon. I shut down the generator, drained the fuel, and put it back in maintenance mode. As I was coiling up the last extension cord, Sarah came out with 2 mugs of hot chocolate. "You know, I was thinking," she said, handing me a mug. "When we first moved here, you said you wanted to get involved in the community. I do not think this is what you had in mind," I laughed. "Not exactly, but it worked out." "Do you regret it? All the fighting and stress and legal bills?" I thought about it. The honest answer was complicated. The past year had been exhausting and expensive, but it had also been necessary. Sometimes you have to fight for what is right, even when it is difficult, even when it costs you. No, I said finally. I do not regret it. If I had just gone along with their stupid rule, Deborah would have kept pushing. More rules, more fines, more control. Someone had to push back. Well, I am glad it is over, Sarah said. And I am glad we can finally have a normal, boring winter without any HOA drama. I clinked my mug against hers. I will drink to that. Of course, life in an HOA is never completely drama-free. The following month, the new board sent out a survey asking residents what improvements they wanted to see in the community. Better street lighting, upgraded playground equipment, and community emergency preparedness training were the top 3 responses. Bob and the new board actually listened to the feedback and started implementing changes. In February, the HOA organized a community emergency preparedness workshop in partnership with the Fairfax County Office of Emergency Management. About 80 residents attended, and they covered everything from generator safety to food storage to emergency communication plans. The fire marshal, Deputy Chief Hayes, was one of the presenters. Afterward, he pulled me aside. I heard about your fight with the HOA last year, he said. Good for you for pushing back on that stupid rule. We see it all the time, HOAs implementing restrictions that actually make communities less safe, not more. I just did not want my family to freeze, I said. You did more than that, he replied. You set a precedent. Other neighborhoods have been asking about your case. You might have started something bigger than you realize. I had not thought about it that way. But over the next few months, I heard from people in other HOAs facing similar fights. A guy in Loudoun County reached out because his HOA banned solar panels. A woman in Arlington was fighting restrictions on vegetable gardens. They all wanted to know how I had successfully challenged my HOA. I shared what I learned. Document everything. Build community support. Know your rights under the CC and Articus, and do not be afraid to lawyer up if necessary. Sometimes I referred people to Jennifer Martinez. She told me her HOA practice had doubled in the past year as more homeowners decided to fight back against overreach. By spring, life in Meadowbrook Estates had settled into a comfortable rhythm. The new HOA board was responsive and reasonable. Deborah had moved to a condo in Arlington, and rumor was she had immediately joined that HOA board and was already causing problems. Some people never learn. My generator sat quietly in the backyard, maintained and ready for the next emergency. I ran it once a month to keep it in good condition. Sometimes neighbors would see me testing it and stop by to chat about their own emergency preparedness plans. The generator that had caused so much drama had become just another normal part of life in the neighborhood. In June, Bob asked me to join the HOA's new Emergency Preparedness Committee. I agreed, and we spent the summer developing a neighborhood response plan for disasters. We created a contact list of residents with generators, medical needs, or special skills. We organized block captains to check on neighbors during emergencies. We even convinced the HOA to purchase a large portable generator for the community center, so it could serve as a warming station during winter outages. All of this stemmed from one stupid rule and my refusal to accept it. It was funny how things worked out. August brought another hurricane scare, but the storm veered out to sea and we kept power. September was quiet. October brought beautiful fall weather, and the neighborhood Halloween party, which the new board had actually made fun instead of restricting it to death with rules about costume appropriateness and candy distribution guidelines. In November, I was raking leaves in the front yard when a car pulled up. A young couple got out, late 20s, looking at houses in the neighborhood. They approached me. "Excuse me," the woman said. "We are thinking about buying a house on Maple Court. Can you tell us what it is like living here?" I leaned on my rake and considered the question. A year ago, I would have had a lot of warnings about the HOA. Now, things were different. "It is a good neighborhood," I said honestly. "Good schools, nice people, reasonable HOA. We had some issues last year with the old board, but the new leadership is solid. People look out for each other." "What kind of issues?" the man asked. I gave them the short version of the generator saga. They listened with increasingly wide eyes. "Wow," the woman said when I finished. "That is crazy, but it sounds like it worked out." It did. Sometimes you have to fight for common sense, but the community came together and now things are better. If you are thinking about buying here, I would say go for it. Just make sure you read the CC and Articles carefully, and do not be afraid to speak up if something does not make sense. They thanked me and walked back to their car. I watched them drive slowly through the neighborhood, looking at houses. I hoped they would buy here. The neighborhood needed people who were willing to engage, to participate, to push back against stupidity when necessary. That night, Sarah and I sat on the back porch, watching the sun set behind the trees. The generator sat a few feet away, silent but ready. Emma and Tyler were inside doing homework. Everything was peaceful and normal. "Do you ever think about moving?" Sarah asked suddenly. "After everything that happened, would you want to go somewhere without an HOA?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "But honestly, I like it here. I like our house, our neighbors, the schools. And now that the HOA is functioning like it should, there is no reason to leave." "I am glad," she said. "The kids love it here, and I think you are good at the community involvement stuff, even if it comes with drama sometimes." I laughed. "I could do with less drama." "You say that, but I think you secretly enjoyed taking down Deborah." She was not wrong. There had been a certain satisfaction in standing up to a petty tyrant and winning. Winter arrived again. December 20th came and went, 2 years after that first power outage that started everything. The power stayed on this time. My generator sat unused, which was fine. I would rather not need it. But knowing it was there, knowing I had the right to use it whenever necessary, that mattered. On Christmas Eve, the neighborhood looked like a postcard. Snow-covered lawns, lights twinkling on houses, families gathering for the holiday. Bob and Kelly had organized a neighborhood caroling event, and about 50 people bundled up and walked through the streets singing. Even bad singers like me were welcome. As we walked past Deborah's old house, now occupied by a nice family with 3 kids, I thought about how much had changed in 2 years. One unreasonable rule had set off a chain reaction that transformed the entire community. We had gone from a neighborhood ruled by fear and petty regulations to one where people actually liked each other and worked together. All because I refused to let my family freeze in the dark. The new year came quietly. January was cold, but the power stayed on. February brought a few minor snowstorms, but nothing that knocked out the grid. March arrived with the promise of spring. Life was good, normal, and blessedly free of HOA drama. On the 2-year anniversary of winning the generator fight, Jennifer Martinez called. "I wanted to let you know something," she said. "Your case has been cited in 3 other HOA lawsuits in Virginia. You set a legal precedent about unreasonable restrictions on emergency equipment. Judges are using your case as an example." "Really?" I was surprised. "Really?" "You made a difference, Thomas. Not just for your neighborhood, but for homeowners across the state." After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, staring out the window at the backyard where my generator waited patiently for the next emergency. I had not set out to change anything beyond my own situation. I just wanted to keep my family warm. But sometimes standing up for yourself means standing up for everyone. Sarah came into the kitchen. "Who was on the phone?" "Jennifer. Apparently our case is being cited in other lawsuits." "Look at you making legal history," she teased. "Next thing you know, you will be running for HOA president." "Absolutely not," I said firmly. "I have had enough HOA politics to last a lifetime. I am perfectly happy being a regular member who shows up to meetings and votes." "Good," she said. "Because I do not think I could handle another year like that." "Me neither," I agreed. "But life has a way of surprising you." In November, Bob called to tell me he was being transferred to California for work. He would be moving in January. That meant the HOA board would need a new president. "You should run," Bob said. "You know the issues, people respect you, and you are not afraid to stand up for what is right." "I do not know," I said. "That is a lot of time and responsibility." "Think about it," he urged. "The neighborhood needs someone like you." I thought about it. I talked to Sarah about it. I considered the time commitment and the potential headaches. And then I remembered standing in my cold house 2 years ago, watching my children shiver, and deciding that sometimes you have to fight. In December, I submitted my name for the HOA board election. 3 other people were running. Linda Chen was trying to make a comeback. A retired accountant named Frank Morrison wanted to bring fiscal responsibility back. And a young tech worker named Jennifer Lee wanted to modernize the HOA's communication systems. The election was held in January at the annual meeting. I gave a short speech about transparency, reasonableness, and community engagement. Linda Chen gave a speech about her experience and knowledge. Frank Morrison talked about budgets and reserves. Jennifer Lee talked about apps and websites. When the votes were counted, I won with 58%. Jennifer Lee came in second and won a board seat. Linda Chen came in third and did not. Frank Morrison came in last. So that is how I became HOA president, despite swearing I would never get involved in HOA politics. Life is funny that way. My first act as president was to establish a clear policy. Any proposed rule change would be posted for community feedback 30 days before any vote, and rules would only be implemented if they served a clear safety or property value purpose. No more arbitrary restrictions. No more solutions in search of problems. The second thing I did was make sure the Community Emergency Preparedness Plan was fully funded and updated. We purchased 3 additional generators for community spaces, established emergency supply caches, and conducted quarterly preparedness drills. When the next power outage came, we would be ready. It is now April, and I have been HOA president for 3 months. It is more work than I expected, but less drama than I feared. Turns out when you treat people with respect, listen to concerns, and make reasonable decisions, most HOA business is straightforward and boring. Which is exactly how it should be. My generator still sits in the backyard, maintained and ready. I run it monthly to keep it in shape. Sometimes I think about that night 2 years ago when I started it at 10:01 p.m., knowing I was violating Deborah's stupid rule, knowing it would cause problems. I think about the fight that followed, the stress and expense and legal battles. I think about whether it was worth it. Then I look at my family, warm and safe in our home. I look at my neighborhood, where people help each other instead of fining each other. I look at the legal precedent that is protecting homeowners across Virginia. And I know it was worth every penny, every sleepless night, every hour spent fighting, because at the end of the day, some things are worth fighting for. Your family's safety, your community's well-being, the principle that rules should make sense and serve people, not control them. And if that means running a generator all night while petty tyrants sit in the cold, well, sometimes that is what it takes to make a point. The generator hums in my memory, a steady reminder that standing your ground matters. That one person refusing to accept unreasonable rules can change an entire community. That fighting back against petty tyranny, even when it is hard, even when it costs you, is always the right choice. Last week, I got an email from someone in Texas who had read about my case online. Their HOA was trying to ban backup generators entirely, claiming they were unsightly and unnecessary. They wanted advice on how to fight back. I wrote back with everything I had learned. Document everything, build community support, understand your legal rights, and do not back down from doing what is right. I connected them with Jennifer Martinez, who could refer them to a good HOA attorney in Texas. I shared the letters from the fire marshal and the data on emergency preparedness. And I told them what I wish someone had told me 2 years ago. The fight will be hard, but you are not alone and winning is possible. Because that is what I learned from my war with Deborah Morrison and the Meadowbrook Estates HOA. That one person standing up can inspire others. That communities are stronger than petty tyrants. That common sense eventually prevails. And that sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply refusing to let your family freeze in the dark, no matter what stupid rule someone invented. My generator sits ready in the backyard, a symbol of that fight and that victory. It has not been needed in months, but it is there, maintained and prepared, waiting for the next emergency, the next power outage, the next time I need to keep my family safe. And when that time comes, I will start it up without hesitation, without fear, without any concern about what time the clock says. Because I have the right to protect my family, and I fought hard to keep that right. The story of how an HOA tried to ban generators after 10 p.m., and how I ran mine all night and let them sit in the cold, is really the story of standing up for common sense in a world that sometimes seems to have lost it. It is the story of how one fight over one rule changed an entire community for the better. And it is the story I will tell anyone who asks, in hopes that it inspires them to stand up to petty tyranny in their own lives, whatever form it takes, because that is what heroes do. Not the comic book kind with capes and superpowers, but the everyday kind who simply refuse to accept unreasonable rules, who fight for their families and communities, who stand their ground when it matters. I am not a hero. I am just a guy who wanted to keep his family warm. But sometimes, that is enough to change the world, one generator at a time.